Before the Olympics moves to LA, what about things you might have missed here in Paris?
Oh, the moment that an athlete's shoe came off during the 4x400 metre relay heats.
The moment that a guy had to get the kitchen stepladder out in order to put the high jump bar back on because it was too high for him to reach.
What about two people starting in one lane?
Oh, yeah, that definitely. Well, welcome to 10 Days in Paris from the Running Channel podcast. We're going to be recapping our highlights from the final 5 days of athletics, going through your questions. It's going to be great. Thanks so much to ASICS for making this happen, and let's get into it.
So, Sarah, you're in the stadium, you see a mum getting emotional, and then you tap her on the shoulder and you say, who are you looking out for?
Yeah, so I was sat in the stands and the women's 1500 metre repechage was about to happen. Now, we had a row of Irish fans sitting behind us, and Sophie O'Sullivan was in the first heat of the repechage. Now, someone then came and sat in front of us and they had one of the kind of official lanyards on, which also said O'Sullivan. And then the Irish people behind me said, that is Sonia O'Sullivan,
gold medalist.
Yeah, incredible athletic achievements. And what's incredible is that I feel like sometimes there's an assumption where if you're kind of a really decorated athlete and then your children go on to compete as well, there's this kind of perception that parents coaching children are quite like, really want them to do well, really kind of, I don't know, serious about it and would get quite like heated and aggressive. But actually, she sat there and I have never seen someone look more visibly nervous.
Oh, really?
Yeah, just like sat in the stands, kind of like fiddling with her hair. Like, and then as Sophie was running, she ran an incredible race and it really looked like she just put everything out there. In her first heat, Sophie had run a PB. And then in this one, she narrowly missed out on qualifying for the semi-final. But what really brought a tear to my eye is that Sonia in front of us wasn't like shouting or screaming. She was kind of just nervously bouncing up and down. And then when Sophie just narrowly missed out on doing it, I just saw her mouth like kind of to herself, like, it's okay.
It's okay. Well, she's been through it, hasn't she? She won silver in 2000 in the 5,000 metres. And then at the World Championships in 1995, she won gold. So she's been through it herself and she's just looking at it going, wow, I know, just keep a steady head here and get through it.
Yeah, I think it's one thing being a parent who like you just want your child to do well, but it's another thing when you've been there in that situation as well.
So yesterday was the heats of the men's 5,000 metres, and that's what George Mills was running in. And bear in mind, he'd also been running in all of the rounds of the 1,500 metres.
He's done a lot of running.
He has done a lot of running. I was there to witness heat one of the 5,000 metres. And it's a long, in the grand scheme of kind of track races at the Olympics, it's quite long. Yeah. But oh my goodness, it was so dramatic. 4 people fell over, I think, in heat one, or maybe even 5.
5, I think Mo Ahmed, who had been very close to a medal in the 10,000, fell with like just over a lap to go.
Right.
And then a big bunch came off the final bend all together, and only the first 8. I think the first 8 were going to qualify for the final.
Yeah, and it was so dramatic. We were sat right in front of where that fall happened, and it was just people sprawled out on the track.
Really?
And I texted, because you guys were watching from back at the hotel, and I texted straight away being like, this has just happened.
Yeah, what's happening?
But then what I didn't realise is that they can then appeal that decision if you've fallen over.
But only if you finish. So quite often you might think someone falls really early in a race, or in this case with 100 metres to go, you'd be excused if they just walk. You might think, oh well,
walk off.
You obviously haven't qualified, walk off the track. Yeah. But if they don't cross the line and finish, so if you fell in the first 2 laps of the 5,000 metres, you've still got 10.5 laps to go. Then your only chance of being progressed to the next round on appeal is if you finish.
Andy, that brings new meaning to the phrase "jog it in."
Yes,
Jog it in. Yeah, that was like, people really did clap them over the line though, because it was like everyone else had kind of sprinted and finished, and then there was just a real kind of like limping, jogging.
Yeah, but then when they got to the line, that's actually when the real drama happened, because George Mills then approached the French guy and basically kicked off at him and said, "That was your fault. You tripped me." And
I think that was. Based on, I'm not an expert lip reader, but I think his language was a little bit more colourful than that.
Yeah. A little bit more colourful,
And the similarities in memes that have been spread across social media.
I've seen a side-by-side meme of like kind of George Mills squaring up to the French athlete Hay, and then also from a previous football life, his dad squaring up to a footballer, probably Robbie Savage.
But hey, I mean, that aside, the decision was appealed and it was accepted. So he is progressed through to the next round.
Yeah, it's interesting. It looked to me on the replays and at the time like George Mills tried to squeeze through a gap that wasn't really there, and then they all kind of bounced off each other. And then there was this like domino effect as four people fell over. It was absolute chaos.
Yeah.
So I think, but it's very hard to make those decisions. And in slow mo, everything looks different to how it does in real time. So it's great that he's in the final. But what that adds into the mix is that by the time you get to the 5,000 meter final, there's not going to be 16 people in there. There's going to be 20 because 4 people have been reinstated, and that's
Will
already.
We see another 4?
Yeah, exactly. In this segment of the podcast, we teamed up with ASICS to talk about a sound mind in a sound body and how overall well-being, both from a physical fitness and from a mental well-being perspective, is really important. So today we're going to talk about the power of running to help your mental health, but also actually about how that can be supported through friendships and rivalry from competition and essentially shared experience.
Yeah, so yesterday we saw 2 high jumpers who became very famous after the last Olympics.
Yes.
Because they shared a gold medal.
Yes, that's Tamberi from Italy and Barshim from Qatar.
And the friendship between these 2 guys goes way back. Both of them struggled with injuries in the lead up to that Olympic Games, and they kind of bunny hopped each other in having the same kind of injury and really helped each other out. Absolutely brutal when you feel like you're right at the top of your game and then you get injured just before a major event. But then they both came back past injury, recovered, and then literally tried to out-jump each other, and then eventually went, actually, can we just share the gold? Because a clear winner wasn't there. They both jumped and failed at various heights.
And it's unusual in the jumps in particular because it's so difficult to have an exactly matching scorecard, because that's the only way that you can share something, because otherwise count back, if one of you's failed at an earlier height and the other one hasn't, then that means you've got different results. So there is a definite winner. And they'd shared that injury story over like 4 or 5 years. There's really lovely stories about them kind of knocking on one another's hotel room doors when one of them has been completely like bereft and crying and really upset, and they supported each other through these things, and they got a lot of stick, I think, for sharing the medals, because there's some, I suppose, purists or athletes who just couldn't imagine sharing that moment, and they would have said like, oh well, I would have gone for the win. But I think
broke down the emotion, didn't they?
They did, and they apparently they literally made eye contact and both knew straight away that that's what they both wanted.
It was a strange world though, wasn't it? 'Cause Tokyo 2020 in 2021, no crowds. It was basically just your team. Very small amount of people allowed into the stadium because of COVID rules, and you just see these pictures of them sharing gold, but breaking down on the track in a completely empty stadium. It really shone a light, actually, on how different it is here, and we've got a real Olympics back in Paris, haven't we?
Yeah, and we've been talking about very different rivalries, haven't we? Like Kerr and Ingebrigtsen, where there is like real animosity there, whereas these guys are trying to be the very best at the same sport at the same time, and you think there'd be a real reason to not like each other. But the fact that you can share those injury stories together and that power, anyone who's been and run a park run or a marathon or whatever it is, and you cross the finish line with the people that have been around you, there's this instant connection of the power of shared experience. And I've made some of my best friends, I've already said this, through sport. And actually, I'm still in close contact with some of the guys that I competed against and who were my big rivals, because you know what it takes to compete at that level, or to have done the thing that you've just done if it's the 5K or a marathon. And so I think that immediately gives you this bond that you shouldn't kind of underestimate. And maybe just, chat to the people when you finish a race and exchange contact details or whatever it might be, because that's where like these amazing friendships can come from.
So this morning, I thought it's 6 o'clock. It's beautiful. I'm going to get out there.
About this, yeah.
No. And I thought, what can I run to? Because I normally listen to a podcast while I'm running, but I thought, I'm in Paris. I'll run to something different. I thought, what fits this beautiful city as the sun rises over the Seine and the Notre Dame Cathedral? Michael Bolton. So I put on Michael Bolton. I thought, love songs. So I was listening to How Can We Be Lovers If We Can't Be Friends?
Yeah.
I said I love you, but I lied. How am I supposed to live without you? And I realized that I'd picked all the songs that really were the opposite of love songs.
Just ready for this podcast.
Yeah.
Wait, and where did you run to?
Oh, I did about 5 or 6K. So went down to the Seine, found some jardins. I'll tell you what I would say. Very few green spaces in Paris.
Well,
very few.
Andy had an opposite experience, but you did have to make a bit of a trek to get over there.
Yeah, so I cycled across last night to do my workout and in the Bois de Boulogne, which is a beautiful forest man-made forest area, but it is stunning. It's really lovely, and it's massive as well. It's about 25-minute cycle from where we're staying. So I cycled, then did my warm-up, then got involved into my workout. It was so hot that I did something that I haven't done in years. It was a very quiet park. It's part of the park.
Oh, yeah? No, you took your top off, didn't you?
I did. I took my t-shirt. I took my t-shirt off.
Oh, gosh. Yeah. I'm so sorry if you were in that park.
I'm not proud, but I panicked because I was running a lap around a lake, which was about 2 kilometres.
Yeah.
The lap, and I tucked my t-shirt securely into the back of my shorts.
You gave yourself a little tail?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, nice.
Cracked on because it was super hot. I'm pretty quiet. I wouldn't have run topless through like the Champs-Elysees. And then...
wouldn't you? No, okay.
And then I finished my first effort, which was a 3-mile threshold, sort of checked my back of my shorts, no t-shirt.
Oh.
Your tail has dropped off.
Yeah. And you're a 30-minute cycle away.
Across the centre of Paris. Yes. yeah.
Oh my gosh, I can see the headline now.
Yeah, and I had
12 years later, Olympian still rides topless through the centre of Paris.
And because of how hot it was, I've got a selection of shorts out here, and I had worn my shortest shorts.
Nice.
So
we've got shoes on, crew sock, tiny little shorts,
hat, sunglasses.
Do you not find it funny? That's like one of those things. Like if you wear a hat but not a t-shirt.
Yeah, well, the hat was keeping the sun off off my head, which has no hair. So trying to avoid the sunburn. So yeah, but luckily enough, I'd given up on it because I'd done a few more laps after that with the rest of my workout, and I was just resigned to the fact of cycling embarrassed to go back across Paris. And then I spent the last lap searching for a water tap that I'd spotted on the first lap of my run.
Oh yeah.
And then I found it. And then as I was walking over to it, someone had put my t-shirt on the fence just next to it.
A good Parisian.
Well done, Paris.
So I was spared that embarrassment.
The 200 metres, it was drama, wasn't it?
Oh, it just feels like every single time we go into a final expecting the result, the complete opposite happens as to what you think is going to happen. Noah Lyles didn't win.
I know, yeah. We've gone straight in with the result, but he came out like he expected to win, with that exuberant kind of bounce out of the, they individually get announced out of the little doors or the setup with the screens and stuff.
Yeah.
And he came and leapt over some of the stuff on the track and was like yelling and screaming and like was really up for it.
How annoyed would you be if you're the person that's coordinating those entrances? Because what the athletes are supposed to do is their flag gets displayed on a screen behind them. They come out, they wait, their name gets announced, they do something, and then they run out onto the track. Noah Lyles came out, ignored all protocol, ran past the camera, and I feel like through the TV screen you could just hear the panic of like, has anyone got a camera on Lyles?
The production team.
Get a camera on Lyles.
Yeah. I mean, he played the game, didn't he?
He did.
He literally came out, nobody was doubting him. Clear favourite to win the 200 metres last night. And then afterwards...
I don't know whether he was favourite kind of coming into it, but then through the rounds he hadn't won any of his rounds, had he? So.
Well, for anyone who's watched Sprint, Noah Lyles talks about the 200 metres as his wife.
Yes.
And the 100 metres as his mistress.
Right, he's got in trouble yesterday, hasn't he?
Yeah. Well, he feels good. And then afterwards, I mean, the difference between him afterwards sitting on a wheelchair.
Yes.
Yeah. So it was... So the 200 metres, we watched it happen on the TV screen. He starts off strong. He came up to kind of the kind of front position as they came around the bend, and then suddenly he just dropped back and then it looked as if he didn't have that extra little kick which you expect if you've ever watched Noah Lyles compete in a 200 before. The reason that he says that he kind of prefers the 200 is because you have that bit more time. So you can have a strong start, or if your start isn't quite as good, you've got enough time to make up for it, and then it's always in that last kind of like 60 metres that he just pushes on and goes. But yesterday that just didn't happen.
Yeah, and the former US great, former world record holder Michael Johnson is always talking about speed endurance. In my context, speed endurance is kind of 800, 1500, but in the context for these guys, it's the difference between those that can run, say, an incredible 60 metres, maybe they can hold on for 100 metres. But the difference for him is those that can transfer or transition, as they always say, off the bend onto the straight and be able to actually hold it together in that last 50 metres and stay strong.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there are quite a few, like both male and female sprinters that do try to do the double, the 100, 200. And you would think like, oh, they're both short distances, but actually there's quite a big difference. And the other thing as well is that me and Rick were saying last night, oh, he hasn't kind of won some of the heats. Maybe he's saving himself. But actually, if you do win the heat, you get a better lane allocation in the final. So then that's something to consider as well.
Hey, I tell you what blew my mind when we were discussing Katrina Johnson-Thompson last night. She was at the Olympics with you.
Yes, in 2012. Thanks, Alex. This is your favourite game, isn't it, to make me feel old?
And she's still going.
Yeah. And she's leading. So as at the point of recording, they'll be about to start day 2 of the heptathlon. But yesterday they've had 4 of the 7 events. So they start with the 100 metre hurdles, then they go into the high jump, then there's the shot put, and then they finish with the 200 on day 1. And after that, she has a very narrow lead over the defending Olympic champion, Nafi Thiam from Belgium.
Also, I want to quickly mention Shari Hawkins, who is also in the women's heptathlon. So she was looking to be competitive, hoping for a medal, but unfortunately didn't score any points in the high jump, which is going to make that super difficult for her. But
impossible,
there's videos of her after the high jump just looking like shaking, really shocked, because you basically, I think you can score maybe more points or like a higher amount of starting points when you come in at the high jump at a higher height. So she set the height to come in at.
You know, the points are only based on your final height. So like you need to get a score on the board.
Yeah.
So she came in at 170, I think.
Yeah. And you only get 3 attempts in the high jump as well. So then she'd set that to come in at, couldn't drop the height, and then didn't clear it on all 3 attempts. So then
zero
points. Which must be gutting.
But there's I suppose tactics isn't quite the right word, but they have to, because of the 7 events, if you were a high jumper and that was your only event that you were doing, you can kind of afford to come in lower thinking, I've got time here. Whereas in the heptathlon, they're trying to conserve as much energy as possible. So they're constantly trying to balance, like, should I come in lower and get a safe one in, but then I'm going to use up some of my energy that I need today?
Yeah.
Or come in at what she must have thought 170 was comfortable for her, otherwise you wouldn't come in at it. But then to fail it, like you've got to mark out your run up in exactly the same way. Small things, by my understanding, can make a big difference to whether you get it right or not. So it can feel really different.
Right, before we get into all of the action, I just want to pick up some of the things that I saw yesterday. So I went to the morning session and there was the heats, one of the rounds for the 4x400 metre relay. Someone's shoe came off.
I've never seen this before, and I have seen the replay of this. And it didn't, no, he's in his own lane.
Yeah.
No one stood on the back of his spike to kind of wrench it off. It just, at about 200 metres to go, just flies off.
Do you think he'd not done his laces properly?
Or
he's done a Sarah and just slipped them on without ever untying or tying the laces.
Or done a Mo who never reties his shoelaces. It's like one tie and that's it for life.
Wow, that is
I'm quite similar.
Crazy.
But yeah, it flew off. Luckily, it was a runner from Trinidad and Tobago. Luckily, he was in an outer lane. Otherwise, that's a bit of a weapon, a spike really flying through the air.
On that, I suppose that was in the morning session. Another unusual thing in the morning session, really quickly, was that they'd put 2 semi-finals in the morning session, which is, so they had the men's 800 metres, and then I think they had the women's hurdles.
Yeah.
And having semi-finals in the morning session, I think, is quite strange. Usually that's reserved for the heats, and then once you're in the semis, it starts to get more serious, and often they're in the evening sessions, but they're trying to pad out these morning sessions to make sure there's more high-profile events.
It's really nice to have like a jam-packed session in the morning, and there was such a buzz around it as well, especially because we were getting to the kind of concluding events of the heptathlon, 7 events, which I learned yesterday. So yeah, that was all very exciting. Other things that were exciting throughout the day yesterday, I learned that Rick uses a handkerchief.
What's wrong with using a handkerchief?
Have you ever met a more likely candidate for using a handkerchief than Rick, though?
Do you not find it weird that you just carry your own snot around with you?
Yeah.
Well, no, because you have a fresh one every day. So you
have a fresh one?
How many handkerchiefs
How
have you
many
brought with you?
handkerchiefs did you bring to Paris?
I probably bought 5 handkerchiefs.
And have you washed them?
Yes. Yeah, I washed them the other day on a really dodgy drying rack.
Have you... I would bet money that your handkerchiefs are monogrammed.
They have got, one of them has got my initials on it.
Yeah,
it's my wedding handkerchief.
What do the other ones have? They're just plain.
They're just plain, yeah. But one has RCK in it, yeah.
Love it. Team GB women.
Silver.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good. And we have to talk about if you can go and find the slow-mo video of Sha'Carri Richardson from Team USA. The Team USA women got the gold medal, and there is a beautiful moment. Slow-mo cameras have really done the world justice here, where you can see Sha'Carri look over to her right as she's coming down to cross the line and take home gold. And it's a face of, I got this.
It's a very
with
smug,
about 10
very
meters
smug
to go.
face.
Yeah, so
Right.
good. But yeah, they did really well. Although Team GB maybe could have got the gold if they'd had a better changeover.
Well, I think also the USA's changeovers weren't super slick, so it's a lot of if and what could possibly happen. But yeah, it was very, very close, and it's those tiny fine margins that decide gold medals.
Has anyone ever thrown the baton to each other?
You're not allowed to do that.
Oh, you're not?
No.
So it has to be touching one hand into another hand.
The risk factor there has got to be very high.
Also, the thing with the relays is that the team that you have reserves. So that must be hard as well. Like, it's not a kind of a team of 4 that go out. You have kind of like a team of 6 selected, and then there might be a few bits of reshuffling going
for the
on.
men's team for the 4x1 for Team GB, Richard Kelsey ran in the heats but not the final, so he will get a medal as someone who has contributed to that effort. It's the same rules in the swimming. If you compete, often there might be people that are still competing in their main individual event, and so they get rested in the heats as long as the country are confident that they're going to get through without that superstar.
Should we talk about, so the last night we'd all had enough of each other. It was going to happen. We're on day 8, guys. Rick's a lot. But we'd all decided that actually we needed a night of rest. So we all retired to our rooms. Turns out me and Andy had the same plan of just eating chicken in bed. Rick went without dinner. And we were all
Valkyrie.
Love it. And we were all watching the athletics on TV separately, but we were still WhatsApping each other being like, have you seen this? This has happened. So you were watching the final race of the heptathlon, 800
meters, where Katrina Johnson-Thompson was basically taking on Tiam, the Belgian runner, to win gold. Yeah. But at the start of the 800 meters, they're going across the lines, introducing every athlete. It gets to the 4th lane. And what is going on in the 4th lane? There are 2 athletes sharing 1 lane.
Oh, yeah, I did see this.
What is going on? Is that allowed?
Yeah, it happens in the 800 quite a lot. You wouldn't normally see it in the championships, although in the heptathlon, if they need to have all of the people that are in contention for a medal in that final 800 meters, there could be a blanket across, 10 athletes, for example. So then they'll try to have them. It's not fair for someone trying to get a medal to be in, because they have too many people for one 800 heat. So there is a heptathlon 800 heat that you probably don't always see on TV because it's not the gold medal heat. But on the circuit, like the Diamond League and so on, it's more common because you might have 10 or 12 athletes trying to run 800 meters. Mm-hmm. And then, you usually towards the outside, so lanes 5, 6, 7, 8, they might put 2 athletes in there. And then you I've done it before, and I was always quite slow off the line, so I didn't really care. And especially if I was doing 800 meters, which is super fast for me, the natural 800 meter runners would just sprint off the line. I get left behind anyway.
I see. But how long have you got to stay in that lane for?
The same as normal for 800. So it's just the first bend, and then there's little green cones that they put out. Once you pass them, you can go into.
So it's about 100 meters.
Yeah.
But that's still quite tough. You're sharing a lane if you're of equal speed with that other person, and you're sharing a lane, and you'll be foot faulted essentially if you step out of line.
Yeah.
So you've got half a lane compared to the other athletes.
Yeah, it's very rare that people would. You just take a hit. One of you takes a hit and runs behind the other one. You don't try and run shoulder to shoulder in the lane.
But this race was really interesting because usually in a final, and this one kind of determined who was the gold medalist in the heptathlon, within a final, you're purely looking at who comes first, like who wins. Whereas in this one, it was different. Katarina Johnson-Thompson needed to cross the line 8 seconds ahead of
Nafi Tiam.
Yeah, in order to win. And so me and Andy this morning said that we did the same thing.
Counting seconds.
She crossed, and I was like, 1
me
elephant,
too.
2 elephant. Because they didn't have the time on screen.
It was 6, wasn't it, I think?
Yeah.
So 2 seconds out.
Heartbreakingly close.
Yeah.
But first Olympic medal for KJT, and she did so well.
We've got to move on to the marathon, to the men's
so
marathon.
much happening.
Yeah, I know. So, of course, all the build-up with the marathon was about Kipchoge and Bekele, but it was actually the Ethiopian Tola that won. So that time, 2 hours, 6 minutes, 26 seconds on a course that had a 14% gradient in the Paris heat. it's impressive.
Yeah, we were watching, we watched at the 2K mark to start off with and watched them come past. I will note, there were almost as many motorbikes and bikes as there were runners.
More, I think. And a fleet of cars came around.
It felt like we were watching a parade
Yeah.
with like a few marathon runners in the middle. Then we went to the finish line to watch in the stands. And we saw the kind of hilly gradient section in the middle on the TV screens. Now, cameras flatten hills. However, this is the first hill that I've ever seen on a camera where I've been like, gosh, that must be hilly, because it looked like a proper hill. You saw them slow down. You saw how strained it was. We didn't see anyone who walked, but maybe walking would have been quicker for some people.
Do you want some hill stats?
Yeah, go on. Give us some hill stats.
Not only did Paula Radcliffe, former marathon world record holder, describe this as one of the toughest Olympic marathon courses in history, but also at 29K, and bear in mind at this point that there's been rolling hills from 15K on this course. There was a hill where there's 209 feet. I don't know why it's in feet and meters, but this is what I've got the data for. So 209 feet of elevation gain in 600 meters. That's how steep that. And sections of that hill.
209 feet of gain.
Yeah. So what's that? 70 meters of gain in 600
70
meters.
70 and 600.
And the steepest section was 14.6%.
This is the Paris Marathon, not the Himalayan Marathon.
And do you want a benchmark comparison? So people talk about Heartbreak Hill at Boston Marathon.
Yeah.
And that's only 87 feet as opposed to 209 feet over the same sort of 600 meter distance and has a max gradient of 5%, not 14%. So, and for even more context, I love this stuff. Sorry, you're going to stop me in a second. Tola, who ended up winning from 20 to 30K, his 10K split was 29-29. And so that's during the hilliest section. He's run 29.29 for 10K in the middle of a marathon.
He needs to go into trail running. He'd absolutely smash that. But yeah, that was so impressive. Obviously heartbreaking for Kipchoge. He ended up dropping out of the marathon. I'm not sure what's next for him, but what an incredible course. And I feel like it's quite nice and relatable for anyone who's run a marathon. Most people usually go for the flat ones. So to see athletes having such a hard time of it because of the course, it's great to watch.
I want to shout out to Emil Caress, fourth place for Team GP.
Yeah, incredible.
He collapsed at the end. He disappeared behind one of the advertising hoardings.
And then all of the cameras surrounded him and started taking
no one came
photos.
to help him, but he's fine.
Yeah, they seem to prioritise photography, not medical aid. But he ran 2:07.29. Bear in mind his marathon debut. First ever marathon was in 2023, and he's run very close, within a minute, I think, of his PB on the toughest course.
Yeah.
And in the heat.
Amazing. And he came third in London as well, didn't he?
He did, in London Marathon.
So impressive.
The high jump. Andy and I watched that last night.
Yes, we did.
It was unbelievable. I've realised the high jump is actually the showman's sport.
Oh, yeah.
Really? Over the pole vault?
Over the pole vault. Yeah. They are all working the crowd. At one point, you get to realise how different some of the competitors are. So some will work the crowd. They'll clap. They'll cheer. They'll kind of like point to the crowd and they'll get different sections going.
Yeah.
They'll build up the crescendo. Others will say, shh, be quiet. And then they'll even get the tannoy announcer to stop speaking and get the stadium controller to turn the music down.
80,000 people, complete deathly silence. Also, what's interesting is the same athletes, actually. I saw one athlete choose to have complete silence for their second attempt at a height and then go the complete other extreme and get everyone doing the clap and then making the noise for their third attempt.
It's like the best social experiment ever. I reckon with each attempt, you're just like, oh, what can I get them to do now?
Well, also, we were very fortunate, Rick and I, to have seats in about row 7, so really close to the track.
Yeah.
And we were right in front of the high jump,
Nice.
even closer than we were to the pole vault. And we were surrounded by the coaches and agents and family of a lot of the high jumpers and the super fans. Tamberi, who shared the Olympic gold medal in 2021, had an army of 30 or 40 kind of super fans in Italian blue t-shirts with a stylized gold picture of his face on. And
nice.
Italian flags. And they were going absolutely crazy. So the atmosphere was amazing. And you got to see up close kind of the minutiae of the discussions with their coach. And then did you spot, Rick, the multicolored pieces of tape on the track?
Which actually is quite difficult, I thought, for a lot of the competitors in the high jump because they've got to be watching everything that's going on in the track when you've got all the athletes coming past as well. So their competition's going on while there's probably about 3 or 4 different events that's going on the
Because
track.
I found that interesting because the high jumpers where they're doing like single discipline, they start actually from the other side of the track, don't they? But when I was watching the heptathletes do the high jump, their run up started from the infield.
Because the heptathletes perhaps don't have such a long run up.
Yeah,
because the men's high jump last night, they all were starting on the laned section of the track and then running onto the infield.
But then Shelby McEwen, who won the silver medal for the USA, some of his run-ups, like this is the guy Andy was talking about when he said sometimes he did the big clap, sometimes he went for silence. He did some of his run-ups from inside the lane, some from outside, whereas the winner, who was New Zealand's Hamish Kerr, he always started way back in about lane 5 or 6.
Well, and interestingly, the little bits of tape I was talking about, that's where they each mark out their individual run-up as to where they're going to start from. And then as it got to the business end of it, they were having constant conversations with their coaches, and then they would go pick up their little piece of tape. And I was expecting them to move it by like a foot or 2 feet, and they'd move it by sort of 3 centimeters. and you think, really? And then they jump, then they'd clear it, and you go, oh, right, that's the fine margins of...
Oh, that would stress me out, though. If I was going to move my little bit of tape, I'd be like, can I just have a quick practice?
Speaking of magical, Ingebrigtsen, 5,000 metres, dominance. Andy, did you spot the look up with 200 metres to go?
Yeah, well, it was right in front of us as he came round past the kind of steeplechase barriers where the high jumpers were. That's where we were, so 150 metres to go. And he just looked up at just coming in round the bend there, you saw him just casually almost look up at the big screen, which was directly behind us at that point.
What was he doing though? What was the point in that?
He's seeing how far people are behind him.
He's looking at who's there and where they are. And if they're like poised and ready, are they looking like they were hurting? Because we've been talking about his rivalry with Josh Kerr in the 1500 metres, which ultimately then they both got overtaken by Carl Hawker from the USA. But actually... And I think of Ingebrigtsen, as a 1,500 metre runner. He's very close to breaking one of the longest standing world records there is in the 1,500. But he's finished silver in the last 2 world championships. Didn't get a medal at all in the Olympics over 1,500 metres. Whereas in the 5,000 metres, he's won the last 2 world championships in the last 2 years. And now he's got an Olympic gold. So actually, is he potentially a better 5,000 metre runner?
Yes, he is. So interesting, because I just think of him as a 1,500.
Yeah.
I kind of forgot that he was in the 5K, and then watching him in the heats, I was like, oh, you're giving this one a go as well.
We were watching, and the reason that they played into his hands, like it seems crazy to me that you've got a bunch of guys in there who are potentially 5,000 metre specialists, and he's doubled, and you don't make him run harder. So they were... I was describing as jogging. That was for the caliber of people in that field through the first 3K or so. And then if you're Ingebrigtsen, you're thinking, as soon as it gets inside that last 4 laps, that's a mile to go. Like, this is my event.
Yeah.
And you've not hurt me yet. And that's what it looked like watching him. He was supremely confident, and there was no doubt at all in that last few hundred meters, as opposed to in the 1,500 meters when you could see things unraveling. He just looked so good.
I think it's always nice when someone gets a little redemption story, isn't it?
Well, you definitely go on. How many laps, Sarah, of the track is 5,000 meters?
12 and a half, Rick. 12 and a half.
So I have it in my notes that halfway through the 5,000 meters, Rick turns to me and goes, "It's 14 laps, right?"
All right, some bad maths. Yeah. I did
always work back.
Yeah, always work backwards. I did like the split waterfall start though on it, because there were so many competitors.
Oh, did they have cones out on the
And then
course?
I think they streamed in together. I think it was after only about 100 meters.
Yeah, so they were on the first bend in. Yeah. It's unusual to see that in a final. You might see it in the 10,000 because it's a straight final, so there might be 30 athletes in the 10,000s, and you're trying to split them in half. Make some of them run around the essentially their inside-most person of the outside group is running in lane 5. So they split the track in half for that first bend to stop them all coming together and people inevitably falling over. But to have that in a 5,000 meter Olympic final is unusual, because usually you'd limit that number. But 4 people got reinstated from all of that. Kind of 4 people fell over in the heats. So those guys got advanced.
How did George Mills do?
He hit the lead at one point, but then he did fade when the pace really picked up. Bear in mind that Ingebrigtsen, I think, ran a 2:21 last kilometre, which is unimaginably fast.
Yeah. The women's 1,500 metres, I mean, we're going to talk about Kip Yeagon obviously getting the gold medal, but there was an amazing story for Team GB there. for Georgia Bell, who retired when she was 27, but picked it up again because of parkrun.
Yeah, so she watched the last Olympics and through COVID, and that inspired her to get back out onto the track. And it's one of these kind of like fairy tale stories that probably is inspiring the poll that we talked about earlier.
Yes,
that's true, actually.
People are probably overlooking the fact that she was a phenomenal athlete before she retired and being like, well, if she gave it a go and she set a national record and got bronze, why can't I?
The one thing that maybe gives me hope actually for that poll is that I'd like to think that they surveyed a whole bunch of people that are under 18.
In actual fact,
it was 18 to 90, I think.
But if there's a whole bunch of
87.
But if there's a whole bunch of kids being inspired by the Olympics and 27% of them think, I want to do that, that's amazing. But I don't think it is. I think it's a lot of slightly unrealistic people, me included, because you get swept up in it.
100%. But I love it. I think it is that the Olympics represents that kind of, that's the dream. And like for a lot of the athletes here, they have the, like Georgia Bell, they have the caliber, they have the skill, they've put in the hard work and the dedication and the training, and that's why they're there. But they would still describe it as the Olympic dream has become a reality.
To be fair to Andy, Sarah, he called it before the race. He did call it.
Did he? What, 1, 2, 3?
No, I was pretty convinced Kipyegon would win.
Yeah.
And then someone asked me, so I'm a huge Laura Muir fan. Like she's been inspiring to me, even as a retired 1500, like just seeing her, the way that she races and so on. And someone next to me in the stand was saying, oh, what do you think? Do you think Laura for a medal? And I think, well, she could have a shot. But actually in the rounds, I thought Georgia Bell looked amazing. And she's also, it is an amazing position to be in when you sort of, no pressure. She said it herself, like she's living this dream.
She walked in. She looked comfortable the whole way around. She sat on the back of the front too.
But you also can't, the one thing we haven't talked about is just how ludicrously fast that race was.
Oh,
so
gosh.
It's probably one of the fastest 1500 meters in history. The world record wasn't quite broken at the front, but I think so Georgia Bell ran 3:52, so she broke Laura Muir's British record.
Wow.
By a fair margin. Kipyegon's running 3:51. Like, these are times that are really hard to explain, but as an example, they went, and this is an interesting part of the race for me, Segai, who's another one of these athletes that's doing multiple events, had just run the 10,000 meters the night before.
The day before. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
But then she went to the front and ran a 59-second first lap. And that's, for context, that'd be a good standard first lap for the women's 800. So that's how fast that was.
Yeah.
That's if they can keep that pace going, that would smash the world record by 5 or 6 seconds.
What I loved is, so I was walking to meet James at the start line of the Marathon Porto as that race was going on, and we were weaving through loads of different kind of French cafes, and every single bar, cafe, restaurant was showing that race, and there were hundreds of people crowded around the screens, which for me, for like a women's 1500 meter race, is so exciting to see people getting invested behind women's sport and just being so excited by the results of it. It's so cool.
We're back in here and Rick's just said, okay, are we ready? Here I come.
Well, I wanted to, because we got to the end of this, I want to pick up on something that we've talked about a lot throughout the last 10 days in Paris, the medal table.
Oh, yeah.
And how it looks compared to if we had our way with the medal table.
Yeah.
Now, how a medal table is done is it basically runs in order of the amount of goals that you get.
Oh my God, you've actually done some maths.
We thought, what happened if it was 3 points for a gold, 2 points for a silver, and 1 point for a bronze?
Oh.
So I've been through the medal table.
How annoyed are you that Great Britain have gone from 4th to 6th?
Yeah, no, it's not great, is it?
Rick,
We've got that
we chatted about doing this yesterday, and Rick was like, yeah, well, I'm only going to do it up to Team GB. And Andy was like, well, that's not fair, because there could be a country that's lower down that would do better. So welcome to Rick Kelsey's level of maths.
I'm going to point out, this is at the time of recording.
Right.
Okay, so...
Yeah, there are still a few medals to be won.
Could still come out. Mm-hmm. So at the moment, China, then the States, then Australia, Japan, France, and then Team GB.
Yeah.
However, if you did it our way and you gave the 3, 2, 1 in points, top of the table would be US by quite some margin.
Really?
China would be second. France would be third. Australia fourth. Team GB would be fifth and Japan sixth. So it would change the table quite dramatically. However, there is a third way as well. Oh. If you just did it on medals won,
like total number
of medals won, then the US would be first, followed by China, and then GB would be third.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, right. So here we go. This is how we should do it from now on. Number of medals.
So we just purely care about Team GB, right? That's the.
Well,
hey, look, you got to be invested in your own country,
exactly.
all right?
We've learned a lot from this exercise in the fact that our way, we tested it, we tried it out, we did the mathematics, it didn't work out. And actually the best way for LA, which we're going to be talking about in this episode, about what's going to happen in LA, is to do it simply on the number of medals, because then Team GB will be higher up the charts.
I do feel like the countries who have only brought like less than 10 athletes would have something to say about that.
Yeah.
Well, you said that's what
it.
we've learned. I've learned something else as well. I've learned that if something involves walking, running, or getting out of bed to support me in a marathon, not willing to do it. But if something involves sitting at your laptop in your bed, then you're more than happy to do the maths for a medal table.
Listen, I've got my voice back now, so it's all good.
So what really struck me that was different in the women's marathon compared to the men's was that when the men hit the hilly section, it did quite quickly string out the field. And then when they got to the biggest hill at 29K, the leader, that's where he ended up breaking away, and it kind of really decimated the field. Whereas this time, it didn't happen to the same degree, and there was still a larger group of women going up that big hill at 29K. And one of the people that got dropped was Sifan Hassan. So she then had to try and work her way back, and Helena Beery. They both got kind of gapped on that really steep hill, the one with the 14% gradient.
Yeah.
Came off the top. And then you see it in the Tour de France, these terrifying descents. Obviously, they're descending at like 100 kilometers an hour, which is very different. But in the women's marathon, the group had to come together. So people had to run really fast. And what is very rare in a marathon to be able to see such a stark change in kind of cadence and stride length within a few instants. Literally coming off the top of the hill, having this real war of attrition for almost a kilometer. And then all of a sudden switching into what looked like an all-out sprint. I thought that was fascinating.
It's so interesting. I just think this course is so brutal.
It is.
But they all did so well. And actually, what I think is really cool is that because it was that middle kind of 17K portion that had so many hills in it and so many different obstacles, it kept it really interesting. Sometimes when you watch kind of London Marathon or any of the big majors on TV, it's very obvious early on who's in the lead group. It's impossible for the chasing group to catch them, and it kind of just pans out as it pans out. Whereas this, it felt like there was a lot of people coming to the front, people dropping back, people being stronger on the hills, people being weaker on the hills. It constantly gave you something to watch.
Yeah.
And at each kind of point where they crossed over the timing mats, you could go, oh, okay, well, that's changed again.
Yeah. And her schedule throughout this Olympics, Hassan's schedule, you know, she's got a medal in the 3 distance events in a single Olympic Games, which is the first time that's been done. It's incredible achievement what she's done.
It's kind of like we said with Mondo Duplantis, where it was more than a gold medal. She could have gone into that marathon, walked away with a gold medal, and that could have been her Olympics. But actually, no, she wanted to show something more than that. She wanted to show up for people to see that you can go into multiple events and be strong. And actually,
if you're her,
me,
well,
not so much.
It did take a bit of rugby on the last bend. Did you see that?
Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
I genuinely thought neither of them were gonna get to the finish. But it was a proper. I mean, it's a classic tactical thing that you would do if you slightly have the lead and you're wanting to take the racing line in those last few bends. You would squeeze someone out so that they can't come past you.
That was Sifan Hassan trying to squeeze through a gap with a Sefer as they were battling out in the last couple of 100 meters. Right?
But Sifan Hassan is famous for that sprint finish. And after watching her in the 2 previous races, I was not confident in her sprint finish at all, but she absolutely smashed it.
So as we kind of look back to 10 days in Paris, favourite moments for both of you?
Oh gosh, this is going to make me emotional just thinking about it. My favourite moment, and this is going to be an evening, is when the 3 of us went to go watch the athletics together. And do you know why? It was because this time last year, roughly, we all went out to the World Championships in Budapest. And for me and Rick, this was kind of the first time that we'd seen like a big sporting spectacle. And I feel like for all of the times that we went along, we just spent the evening with Andy explaining to us how stuff worked. It was kind of like our little
in life as well as sport.
Just all areas. It was kind of like Andy giving us our little education, and then it's like we've graduated, we've come out to Paris, and now me and you know not everything, but a bit more. And when we went to go watch the Mondo Duplantis world record, watch Keely Hodgkinson bring home a gold for Team GB. That for me is the the magic of the Olympics, to be able to not only see stuff like that, but also share it with two people who I can tolerate.
God, you nearly said people.
Come on, I can't be that nice.
Yeah. Oh, well, my moment would have been, I think, that one. And then I'm going to go to a polar opposite where I didn't go with either of you to the games. No, the two moments. So the final night of the athletics for the women's 1500, and also the Tuesday night of the athletics for the men's 1500.
Interesting. Rick was there for one of them. I was there for neither.
Oh, well.
Thanks, Andy.
I don't know what that says.
Well, I'm biased towards those events, and I just thought that the men's race, the hype around it and the build-up had made it a totally different story. And then it wasn't the fairy tale for Josh Kerr from a Team GB perspective, but I said afterwards that it's one of the greatest races I've ever seen in person. And then the women's race is right up there as well, because that is fresh in my memory, just the sheer pace of it. And then that unexpected medal for Team GB with Georgia Bell, that was a massive highlight for me.
Apart from fanboying about Gabby Thomas throughout the last week,
you got to see her in the relays as well, didn't you?
She was phenomenal.
Did you see her get her medal as well?
Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to return to something I said on day 2 on the show, which is the French attitude to these games. A lot of people in the lead up to London in 2012 were like, oh, it's going to be rubbish. The British are just a bit down about it. And it turned out to be amazing. The French attitude to these games has always been, how can we do that rather than the problem with doing that is. And that's not the normal French attitude, according to many Parisians that we've spoken to here. It's been incredibly positive. And whenever you've been in the stadium, I suppose the gestures they've put towards the crowd to keep us entertained with Champs-Élysées and Johnny Halliday and Lumet Le Feu.
Also the little graphics that they put, they're not just showing crowd shots, they're able to put Olympic glasses onto people's faces. Yeah, it's very good.
So mine would be the French attitude to this games, which I think really has a Lumet Le Feu.
And if you think about what that's done, it's empowered athletes who haven't actually won medals, but they've been French athletes to then essentially do laps of honour, do backflips into the steeplechase pit, propose to people in the stands. It's been magical.
There have been 2 proposals now. I think I saw another one.
Yeah, one of them.
Yeah, I do think that is something that LA needs to...
Well,
they've got a lot to live up to because I feel like Paris has showed themselves in the best possible light here.
I think they can, though. I think that the most travelling fans that I've seen have been from the US. They've got an incredibly passionate kind of group of people that have come to support their athletes. So if they can bring that passion into the stadiums in LA, it's going to be unbelievable.
Gosh, that stadium is going to be loud.
I'm going to finish with this from Mike from Chichester, which I believe is the only city in West Sussex, I think. Not sure. Sounds like it.
You so have that open on another tab on your laptop.
He's just Googled that for sure.
Mike, thank you. Discovering your podcast has given me something much more than I could ever have wished for since the athletics started, making me feel like I'm actually there. Thank you for what you've produced. The narratives between the three of you have been a light in a dark tunnel of FOMO. Best way to describe it is like receiving a birthday card one day late, but with the added bonus of a crisp £10 note hidden inside.
Because he can't be here at the Olympics, and so we're helping him get over that FOMO.
Mike, thank you.
Yeah, that's made my day. It's a lovely way to finish.
Well, that's it from us in Paris, but do not despair. We'll be back next week with another podcast.
Back in the UK.
Yeah, back in the studio. We'll see you then.
Thank you so much for listening to this 10 Days in Paris series. We hope you've enjoyed it, and let us know where you want us to come next and do a series. Rick is well up for editing every single day again.
Well, I mean, my fingers could do with a little break, but I'm up for Japan.
We'll give you a bit of time off. Thanks so much to ASICS for helping us make this happen, and thank you for listening, and we will be in your ears and on your screens very soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.